turned into a Martian. Whoa, I can't even recall my name. Whoa, sometimes I never hardly sleep at night. Whoa, I turned into a Martian today. Alright, hello out there, thrill seekers. It's Brad, and there's Ziggy in a sunbeam. I know it's serious. Yeah, I get that reference. And that song that you heard at the beginning was I Turned Into a Martian by the Misfits. A little trivia for you. Zero Defects, the band I play bass in. We opened for the Misfits on one of their first tours. Maybe their first ever national tour back, I think, in 1983, and they played that song that night because that was on their the album they were promoting called Misfits Walk Among Us. So the reason I decided to sing a little bit of I Turned Into a Martian is because on November 13th, there was a big Senate hearing about UFOs, which they're now calling UAPs, Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. UFO used to be Unidentified Flying Object. I guess it still means that, but they're not calling it that anymore. And I talked about this subject back in July of 2023 when another similar hearing was held, and I thought I'd talk about it again now that this new hearing is held, because I actually think that this is more important, more significant, bigger news than the election that just happened that everybody's still yelling and screaming at each other about. I think that if this thing goes anywhere at all, really, it's going to turn out to be a much bigger deal than who's president of the United States. But so for those of you who didn't see it, it was about 2 hours long, at least the version that I watched. I didn't watch it live. I watched a kind of live stream after the fact. It was about 2 hours long, and there was testimony from 4 people. The only name I remember off the top of my head was Lou Elizondo, who's a big name in the UFO stuff these days. He was I think he was the head of a committee called ATIP, which was Advanced Technology Investigation something or another. It was a secret government organization, military organization, looking into the UFO phenomenon or UAP phenomenon. And there was 2 others. There was a guy from NASA who gave some, he was a kind of a jolly testimony and quite interesting, and 2 other people whose names I don't remember. Anyway, what they were saying, though, was pretty mind-blowing. There they were testifying under oath in front of the American Congress, and testifying under oath, for those of you who may not be from the United States, means that it's legally binding. If you testify under oath and it's found that you're lying, you're not telling the truth, there are repercussions for that. I don't know in this case how bad the repercussions would be and how you would define whether they were lying or not, because to discover whether they were lying or not would require a lot of things to happen that I don't know if they'll happen. But they were basically saying that the United States is in possession of retrieved materials from crashed unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomenon, and also including biological material, which is very unclear. Like, does this mean they have actual bodies of aliens or something like that? And some of the people who testified about this said very clearly that these are not objects made by humans. They are somehow the product of other intelligent species of creatures, and the implication being aliens. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. Now, back in July of 2023, I talked about aliens in the Lotus Sutra, and if you want to go look at that video, it's called Aliens in the Lotus Sutra, and you can look at what I said back then. I'm going to repeat some of that today because some of you may not have seen it. One of the problems that's often brought up, or one of the reasons that's often brought up for why the government and whoever else is involved would have to maintain secrecy about if they actually had definitive proof that we were being visited by aliens. One of the reasons they'd have to keep that secret is because the religious people of the world would freak out and it would cause huge problems. It's often religion is pointed to as one of the main barriers to this. And if you're talking about Christianity, Islam, and maybe to a certain extent Judaism, I can see the argument for that, because Christianity and Islam, in particular, require the intercession into our world, or into the material world, of Jesus or Muhammad. And Jesus appeared in Judea 2,000 years ago, and Muhammad, where was he? In Saudi Arabia? Gosh, I don't know that much about Islam. I should find out. But he appeared somewhere in the Middle East, just like Jesus did, and did his thing. And they were both special representatives of God, special and unique representatives of God. And if the aliens, if we talk to them and they say, yeah, we don't know who this Jesus or Muhammad people are, that could be a problem, because they, the religious leaders of Christianity and Judaism believe that these people are universal saviors. All right, so there could be a problem there. I don't know if the problem would really be a big deal for Judaism, because there's no sort of savior figure, but there's the idea of the chosen people. And so if the Jews are the chosen people, well, maybe the Tralfamadorians are the chosen Tralfamadorians. I don't know. You know how that works. There could be the chosen humans and the chosen Tralfamadorians. I don't know if that would be an out for them. And one of the points I was trying to make in my previous video was that this probably wouldn't be a problem for Hindus and Buddhists. I mean, it might be a problem for individual Hindus and individual Buddhists, and there may be uproars in those parts of the country that are dominated by those religions. I don't know. The problem wouldn't be one of, oh my God, now our whole religion is threatened, is denied because of this revelation of aliens. Because there's aliens all over the place in Hindu and Buddhist literature. And by the way, if you are somebody who works for this show, Ancient Aliens, and you want an expert on Buddhism, a world-renowned expert on Buddhism, who wants to come on your show and talk about aliens, talk to me. You can find me at bw@hardcorezen.info. Write to me, and I will come on your show and talk about aliens in Buddhist and Hindu literature all over the place. So seriously. Anyway, they're all over the place. And in that previous video, I brought up the alien who appears in chapter 24. Okay. I made this point in the last video. There are various translations of the Lotus Sutra, and in some of them, the alien appears in chapter 23, but in this most recent one that I'm showing you now, translated by, Michio Shinozaki, Brooke Zipperin, and David Earhart, I think. In this version, it happens in chapter 24, the Bodhisattva of Wondrous Sound. And then this morning when I was looking it up, when I was trying to find that, because I couldn't remember what chapter it was in, I just happened to open it almost randomly to chapter 11. And there's another alien in chapter 11, and actually I think there's more aliens than even those two. In my dark, murky memory, I remember even reading another account that wasn't this one. This one says, at that time, in front of the Buddha, a stupa of the Precious Seven, I'm not sure who the Precious Seven, who or what the Precious Seven are, 500 yojanas in height and 250 yojanas in width and depth, adorned with all kinds of precious things, sprang up out of the earth into the air, where it remained suspended. And a yojana, I looked up just before I made this video, is about the distance of 8 or 9 miles. I don't know how many kilometers that is, but I would guess 10 or 11 kilometers. So it's big. basically. It was resplendent with 5,000 railings, thousands upon thousands of chambers, and countless banners and streamers. It was draped with strings of jewels, etc., etc. It had all this stuff, and then the 33 heavenly beings rained down with heavenly mandrava flowers in homage to the jeweled stupa, etc., etc. Then a great voice of praise issued forth from within the jeweled stupa, so this thing that's hanging in the air with all these jewels and lights and going bling, 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 and smelling lovely too. It also says that. And then this voice says, "Excellent, excellent world, honored Shakyamuni, for the sake of the great assembly you are able to expound the wondrous Dharma Flower Sutra of universal great wisdom." That is the Lotus Sutra. And so on and so forth. For our purposes today, it sounds like a description of a UAP floating in the air and then issuing all this sound and pronouncements from it. And the notion of other planets on which there live other beings, intelligent beings, is pretty common throughout Hindu and Buddhist literature. So it's very... It's kind of spoken of as if, yeah, this is one of the things everybody knows. Everybody knows there's all these planets and places out there other than Earth that have intelligent life on them, or where they live, and there's different planes of existence, and they can interact with us humans. And what's the big deal? It happens all the time. So is the kind of attitude that is presented in those scriptures. So I think the revelation of actually existing modern aliens would not be too much of a surprise, or would not disrupt their religious sensibilities too much, because it's just there. It would probably tend to confirm them. So what do I think about all this? Well, I'm glad you asked. I don't want to sort of speak in my capacity as some kind of a Buddhist teacher. One of the things I remember early on in my study of Buddhism was that my first teacher was also kind of interested in aliens and science fiction and space and all this stuff too. And he told me the story that he was at a lecture being done by his teacher Kobun Chino Roshi. And somebody at that lecture brought up aliens, like they wanted to know Kobun's opinion about aliens. And Kobun turned to Tim and said, "You should ask Tim about that." And Tim's like, he said, "I turned beet red." And I'm like, what? And why would you ask me? And Kobun said, "Because you read comic books." So his Kobun's opinion was it was kind of the stuff of comic books. And I never asked my teacher, Nishijima Roshi, about it, but probably because whenever I approached any subject like that, he gave the kind of same dismissive sort of answer, like, "Oh, that's just comic book stuff." So I don't want to talk about it in the capacity of a Buddhist teacher, because I think a good Buddhist teacher would probably say, "Oh, that's just comic book stuff." And there's a kind of reason for that, and I don't know if I'll be able to explain it, but let's see where I can go. My opinion is, okay, the sort of consensus that developed around the time that Eric von Daniken put out his book, Chariots of the Gods, which I read when I was like 9 or 10 years old. Chariots of the Gods was this book. It's kind of the basis for the whole Ancient Aliens TV series and all that stuff. And I have my Ancient Aliens shirt. Ancient Astronaut Theorists Say Yes. I'm wearing that today for the sake of this episode. Their idea is, okay, so beginning in the 20th century, the humans built aircraft, eventually spacecraft, and what we did with these machines is we went to other planets, either sending probes, or in the case of the moon, we sent actual people there to look at and explore these other planets, other heavenly bodies. A lot of people consider the moon to be a planet, by the way, which is why I'm including it as a planet. They consider the Earth-Moon system to be a double planet system rather than a typical satellite system, because the moon is so large compared to the Earth. There's a little science for you. Anyway, So we've been to one other planet, which is the moon. So the idea is, okay, maybe aliens are doing the same thing, and they're sending mechanical spacecraft with maybe their own people riding in them and looking at us because they're millions of years more advanced than us, and this is what they do. I tend to think that's unlikely. I don't say it's impossible, but I think that explanation is probably a little bit short-sighted. But I do think that there is good reason to believe that there are intelligences out there in this universe we live that are as intelligent, if not more intelligent, than human beings, who may at some point interact with human beings at some level. I have never personally encountered them, much to my dismay. But I have one close friend who says he encountered them at one point in his life. So there you go with that. In fact, I have two friends who I knew very personally who claim to have one was visited by according to him, an alien, and the other saw a UFO up close, like at very close range. So I have that. So I tend to think the possibility of these things existing is great. My own feeling about what they are, though, might be a little different. And this is all just speculation. So, take this with a grain of salt. This is just me pulling stuff out of my head or out of my butt, if you want to go there. And I don't know if you want to go there. But it's just me speculating, and based on sort of what I have experienced through Buddhist practice. And within my Buddhist practice, it has become quite apparent to me that we normally take our senses to be reliable: hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling. Is that it? The five senses. Whatever the five senses are. We take them to be reliable. The Buddhists add a sixth sense, which is the mind as a sense organ, and it senses thought. It also senses the input from the other senses. So that's interesting, because we in the West tend to think of the mind as something else, something that is reliably relaying to us or conveying to us the information it receives from the senses. And it might be reliably conveying that information, but I think that information is probably limited. I mean, it's obviously limited. And I did a video just a week ago or so where I gave the example of ultraviolet light. We can't see ultraviolet light, but we know it exists. There may be all sorts of things out there that we cannot perceive and would be maybe forever unable to perceive as human beings. So there could be among that milieu of stuff intelligent species, and they might interact with the Earth, and they might have an interest in interacting with the Earth. One of the things that comes up from time to time in Hindu and Buddhist literatures is this idea of protection, that these entities have, among other concerns, the concern of making sure we don't destroy ourselves, and making sure that humanity survives long enough to who knows what, maybe join them in the galactic community or whatever. I don't know. That would be the science fiction explanation. But they don't want us to destroy ourselves, which could be one of the reasons that, as the people on that Senate hearing, I think it was a Senate, I don't know if it was a House of Representatives or Senate, anyway, at that congressional hearing that happened last week, talked about how these UAPs seem to be interested in our nuclear installations and our various weapons, which makes it a national security concern. That's why they brought it to the U.S. government. It might not be exactly a national security concern so much as a kind of sense of making sure we don't use these weapons in a way that's going to cause a lot of destruction. That of course the Hindu and Buddhist scriptures don't say that, but they do have this idea of these sort of aliens who are interested in making sure we survive. Of course, there could be all sorts of things. I listened to a podcast by Isaac Arthur, who's an interesting guy. I listened to some of his podcasts. He's on YouTube, and he's actually I think he's based out of Kent State University, which is where I met Tim McCarthy. He's based in Ohio, I'm pretty sure. And he's a science guy, and he does a lot of interesting podcasts about that. And he did a whole thing about what he thinks about aliens. He wasn't responding to the congressional hearing, but he's basically saying, in his opinion, he doesn't think there's any aliens, any intelligent aliens like humans, that kind of a tool-using, society-having species anywhere not in our galaxy or in the local group of galaxies. He thinks it's such a rare occurrence that you'd have to go out a long way before you found anything like that. But he doesn't discount the possibility that there are other sort of layers of reality in which things could exist and could interact with us. He just doesn't like the idea of mechanical spaceships coming to Earth, which is kind of my position too. I think that's probably not what we're looking at. The other thing I think about all this is that I don't trust anything the U.S. government or any government anywhere in the world comes up with. And so when I see stuff like this, I go, do we really have actual whistleblowers who want to tell us about downed spacecraft in the possession, in Area 51 or Hangar 18 or whatever? Or is this yet another operation by the government trying to steer us away from looking at whatever shenanigans they're getting up to and give us something else to worry about? Even if that's the case, I don't take back what I said at the beginning of the video about this being potentially much bigger than the U.S. presidential election, because if they start pushing that stuff, look out, everybody. We'll see where this goes. But I just think this is all interesting, and I think there is a sort of spiritual aspect to it. The one thing you would get, though, that might be different from the sort of spiritual aspects of this thing that are usually put out. I follow a lot of UFO guys on the internet, and I've read the books and stuff. And if you saw my video for books about UFOs, you can see how many books about UFOs I own. So I've read a lot about this subject and watched a lot of videos and TV shows and movies. And one of the themes that shows up a lot is the idea of these sort of benevolent savior aliens, these aliens as gods. So the aliens themselves are the gods who are going to come down to Earth and save us all. And one of the things you get from the Lotus Sutra is kind of the opposite. I know I said that thing about protector aliens, and this is a slightly different thing. The aliens are just as interested in the Lotus Sutra, the aliens that appear there, or if we call them aliens or whatever they are, they're just as interested in the teachings of Buddhism as we are. So they're not. They don't take the position that they are on high and spiritually much more advanced than us, and they're going to give us all the goods, but in fact they're about on the same level as us. And that's something that runs through some of the Hindu scriptures I've seen before as well. This idea that there are these entities, these beings on other worlds and other planets, but they are also in samsara. Samsara being this kind of level of illusion. So even the aliens, even if they're millions of years advanced beyond us or whatever, they're on a different plane of reality, they're still stuck in illusion, and there's just as much that they would learn from human philosophy and human religion, if we want to go there, as we could learn from them. So that whole cabal of people that I see on the internet who are pushing this idea of the aliens as gods, I think are wrong. I think they're mistaken. I don't think they're any more godlike than us, and I think if it turns out that they show up and pretend to be godlike and pretend to be beyond us, I think that would be a big red flag that we should be quite suspicious of, and we should be quite skeptical about whether they are actually any more spiritually advanced than we human beings are. So anyway, I just thought I'd make a little video speculating about that. There's not, you know, the deeper truths of Buddhism go way beyond any of this stuff. That's another aspect of this, and maybe this is the point of the video, I don't know, is that the deeper truths of Buddhism are actually transcendent over the aliens. So that's kind of why I became more interested in Buddhism than in UFOs. Once I found out about Buddhism, is I thought, well, this goes even beyond that, because this applies to anyone, anywhere in the whole universe, and so it might be that we're just as advanced as the aliens are in some ways. So there you go. That's my little this is just pure entertainment, so don't take any of this too seriously, but that's my speculation about the aliens. So I'm not saying it was aliens, but maybe it was aliens. Anyway, if you want to donate to me buying more books about UFOs, which is probably one of the things I might do with some of your money, but most of it will go to paying for food and shelter and Ziggy food and things like that, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate, and that's where you'll find my PayPal and Patreon account links, and you can also find them in the description, in the YouTube description below. And that is my main way of making a living, but you don't gotta support me. You don't gotta support me if you don't want to support me. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey Ziggy, what do you think about aliens? Do you think aliens have doggies? They say humans developed, co-evolved with dogs, and that without each other we wouldn't have survived the evolutionary process. Do you agree with that? Or are you just looking at something else? All right, Ziggy, we'll see you later. Bye.